Hello and happy Friday, and thanks for tuning in to RadioFreeRhinecliff.org. And this show in particular, correct me if I'm Norm. I'm your host, Norm. I'm thrilled to be here tonight with Scott Kemp. Scott, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Norm.
Yeah, it's fabulous being here. And Scott brought a bottle of wine, which he just unwrapped the foil part, which probably has a name. Do we know what that part's called? No, the foil part.
The foil part? No.
And I begged him to not pull the cork out until we could hear that on the radio.
Right.
So we're going to do that now. Which will be very
See
exciting.
if I can do that.
Yeah. And while you're doing that, I'll read some of your bio. Scott Kemp is the Director of Operations at Ramapo for Children, which is mostly known around here as like Camp Ramapo or Ramapo Camp or whatever. But the website and all of the literature says Ramapo for Children. And he's from Caseyville, Illinois, which I looked up has a population of 4,245. Here it is. Here comes. Come on, cork.
Did he get it?
Not quite. No pop. There it is. Yay. Happy Friday.
Exactly.
So I'll turn the glasses over. Scott, what people at work, they don't call it Ramapo for Children, do they?
A little bit. It's more, most of us know it as Camp Ramapo.
Right.
But because we have so many, different programs now, we're a little bit more than a camp. The resident camp is our flagship program, but
I see.
That's why we went to Ramapo for Children, especially, we do a lot of training in New York City. So it didn't quite, going into New York City schools saying, oh, we're from a camp, didn't quite.
Gotcha. And so when did that happen that you started expanding into these different realms?
So I started year-round in 1998.
Okay.
And that's when we started school year programming, having school groups come up. And we realized, we do something pretty unique at Ramapo in terms of working with kids. And so we wanted to export it to, and touch as many kids as we could. And so we decided to start doing some training. And so we started offering training in New York City. And that's sort of how we've evolved. And then over the years, we've just picked up some other programs. And so,
what kind of training for what kind of people?
So we have a curriculum called the Ramapo Approach. And it's really how to work with young people, how to work with kids. And it's sort of really meeting them where they're at. And then, working with them. We're not focused, even though it says we work with special needs, we're not focused on the diagnosis so much. It's meeting the kids where they're at. And so it's a list of techniques and strategies in terms of how to work with kids. And so now we go into after school programs. New York City, we've sort of evolved it into the classroom. And so we have trainers and professionals that work out of our New York City office that do that piece. That's sort of more training. And then we do all our direct service stuff up here in Rhinebeck.
Amazing. Now, you said you don't focus on sort of like kids with a particular diagnosis, but meet them where they're at. Is it kids that are at a particular place by and large, or is it just general school age population?
General school age population as young as 5.
Okay.
When I started at Ramapo back in 95, they had actually a program called Mild Months. So they used to bring 4, 5, and 6-year-olds that would come for 3 to 4 weeks and from mid-May to mid-June and stay at camp, which is sort of unheard of to hear a 5-year-old, and times have changed even since I've been there. Now, there aren't parents that are letting their 5-year-old go away to sleepaway camp. There aren't parents that are letting their 12-year-old go away to sleepaway camp as much as they used to. But so we had kids as young as 4 and 5 that would come for a month. And it was a lot of preschool agencies that were working with a lot of kids that were sort of trauma impacted, their families. I think it was sort of at the end of sort of the crack wave and stuff like that. So we had a lot of
end of
kids,
the what wave?
When kids were using with the crack and heroin and stuff like that. Yep. And so so we had our Mild Month program for a while. And so we worked with probably about 4 different preschools in New York City, and they would send their kids up for a month. So we had kids as young as 4 that have experienced lots of trauma, foster care, things like that. And then our sort of resident camp is kids with just special needs, so social emotional learning problems. So a lot of kids on the autism spectrum to kids, as I said, may have ADD, ADHD, bipolar disorder. They're kids that are definitely what we sort of say on the margins. And so we want to make a program that we can include them.
Right. Interesting. And you still primarily serve the camp, that population?
Yeah, our resident program is all special needs.
Okay.
We do have our day camp program locally for kids, and so that's just more traditional local kids. We also supervise the after school program at CLS now. We've sort of adopted that. So we've branched out over the years since I've been there, but our focus has always been starting with the resident camp.
Right. Amazing. You've been there how many years?
I started when I was in college in 1995, was my first summer here.
Egads.
And then started year-round in March 98.
Wow. Well, congratulations. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for bringing the wine. It looks good. It's Josh Cabernet Sauvignon. So you started out of college. This is yummy. And you've been there pretty much ever since?
Pretty much. I mean, I was an elementary ed major, so when I finished graduated in 96, so I did a year of teaching locally in the community back home, and then still wanted to come back for summers, and so came back for a summer, and then I was like, I want to stay in New York, so did 6 months in Binghamton, New York,
right.
And then ended up back at the director called me and said, look, we want to do year-round programming. Would you want to join the team? And so
it was a new thing for Ramapo.
Yes. Yeah.
So you said you did teaching back home. Where was home?
Caseyville, and then I taught 5th grade in Belleville, which is just another sort of suburb of St. Louis.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Okay.
So was there for a year, and I did camp, and so I realized that education is fun, but I liked being with kids outdoors and in the camp environment and working with all the different people up here. And so I was ready to sort of move out of my small town and not get stuck there, because you could get that teaching job and then just be there for 20 years. So
you could. And did you teach at a school where you had been a student early in your life?
No, it was a different community.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Caseyville, when you tell people where you're from, do you say Caseyville or St. Louis?
I say St. Louis.
Uh-huh. And is that what it felt like? Was it a suburb of St. Louis?
It's still a small town. It was a suburb. Like literally you could see the arch from my parents' backyard, but then out in the Midwest everything's flat, so you can see for miles. But so my parents, you could definitely still see the skyline of downtown St. Louis. But it wasn't like when you go to college you head over to St. Louis, or you go to the ballpark for the baseball game, but otherwise I wouldn't say I know St. Louis is a city.
Oh, you didn't? So as a kid, it was like 10 miles away or something?
Yeah. And just, it was not, you'd go there for field trips.
Right.
Go to the zoo, go to a baseball game, do, a couple things like that. So.
And did most people in Caseyville commute to St. Louis?
We really were not a commuting. Most people worked, in the local area. It was not a bedroom community for St. Louis, I would say. It was more of a working class resident. So it was construction, laborers, things like that. And it was less, I'm thinking of the people that I knew, and very few friends' parents worked in St. Louis.
Interesting. And so why did your folks go there? Or were they from there?
They're from there. They grew up, both my parents grew up in East St. Louis.
Okay.
And so, we were like the town right next to, or a town
next
above.
Town further out.
Yeah.
The next
exactly.
ring out from East St. Louis.
Yes.
Huh. And their folks grew up in East St. Louis?
Yep.
Generations of...
Yeah, my mom, each of my parents' siblings, or each of my parents have 8 siblings. So, both come from big families. So I have lots of cousins and things like that. So, which was nice growing up. You have all these different people to hang out with. So
I love cousins.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were all in East St. Louis, Caseyville area?
Most of them, again, as people grew up, they started to try something new, and some
Right.
people have moved away or whatever. But there's still a good chunk of the family still in that area.
Do you get back often?
I go back at least once a year. Yep, my mom's still there, so go back and go back and visit. So, but it's nice, to go back and visit, and then.
And so I'm guessing, you have like double-digit cousins, like 20 or 30 cousins.
Yes, yeah, on each side.
Right.
Yeah, so
and you grew up hanging out with all of them. And when you go back once a year, you see your mom. Do you have siblings there?
I have a brother and a sister. Yeah.
Okay, so your folks had a reasonably sized family, unlike
Yes.
your grandparents.
Right. Exactly.
And are they still there, the brother and sister?
Yep, my brothers and sister are both still there. My sister lives, still in Caseyville, 5 minutes away, So I'm the only one that sort of branched out to New York. So, it's funny, like when I moved out here, something happens in New York City and everyone's calling, did you see that? And I'm like, no,
Right.
no, we're not.
Right. The 6 train was late. Did you see that?
Right, exactly. And so, so that was a lot of people getting used to. So then I was like the tourist. So like all the different aunts came through because I lived out in New York. So they would come stay. And so, yeah.
Huh. And did you live in the city at some point? Lived here?
Nope. Just straight, literally have lived in Rhinebeck, lived at Ramapo the entire time.
Do they have housing there?
They have housing there. So when I came on in 98, I lived in the Red Hook Inn for 4 months until the building they were building had an apartment that I was going to move into. So I lived in the Red Hook Inn for 4 months. They
Right.
rented a room for me there. And then I stayed there, and then I've lived on the Rhinebeck campus ever since. So I had a studio apartment, and then eventually they built some houses. And so now I live with my 2 kids, and we live on the property.
That's just amazing. It's probably a great place for the kids to grow up.
Yeah, it's spectacular.
Lots
to
of
have
nature, lots of stuff. There's a pond.
There's a lake, there's, a gym, there's, everything, playgrounds. So it's a great place for them to ride their bikes around and just, it's a great place for them to grow up.
So I want to go back to Caseyville. Was there any bad feeling? Did people say like, well, why are you leaving Caseyville? It's good enough for the past 3 generations. Why isn't it good? Was there any of that kind of stuff?
Not real. I mean, I don't think anyone has any allegiance to the community, but there's definitely a
guess
little
that's my
bit
question.
of, oh, I'm the New Yorker now that, comes back. So I have to be careful not to like be the one to tell everyone what like, oh, you went away. And so you more
You
than
think
all
you
of us.
know it all.
Right. So so I have to tread a little lightly when I come back with my siblings or whatever. But other than that, no.
And did you go to Caseyville High School?
We went
Is there
to
such a thing?
So I went to Catholic school for 8 years.
Okay.
And then went
That
to the
explains
public.
the 8 kids. I
Yeah.
guess.
And then went to public high school. So it was like the community district. So there was like 2,000 in my public high school. So so my graduating class was over 500.
Wow.
So so I went from a Catholic school that had 10 was in my class to a public school of over 500.
Yes.
Each
Are
grade,
you in
so that
touch
was a
with
little-
any of the kids from high school?
Yeah, I have definitely have some friends still. I'm in touch with one of my dear friends. We've been friends since 4th grade.
Yeah.
So we're still in touch. And then, and I still have a lot of friends back home that, still stay in touch with. Yeah.
Right.
So
That's amazing. Yeah, I was thinking, I'm not sure how many of my high school friends I'm in touch with, but I'm really in touch. But Facebook makes it so easy to like sort of have some idea what people are up to.
yes, absolutely.
Wow. So you graduated from this like high school
Yeah.
with 2,000 students, and you went off to college somewhere.
Went off to college. I did community college for a couple years because I worked through, school. So because I was really out of either on both sides. I was probably maybe only the second cousin to go on to university. Most everybody else is, straight to work right after high school. So I went to community college, then went to McKendree University and focused on elementary education. Got my degree, and then while I was at McKendree, I saw I was taking a psychology course, and there was a flyer for Ramapo for the summer. And, and I'd worked.
Wait, so Ramapo, which was here,
Yeah.
had a flyer out in McKendree, which is Lebanon, Illinois.
Yeah.
How the hell did that happen?
That's how they recruited. It's actually we still send 4,000 flyers out to universities, even with the age of everything. We still send that out, and we still get kids that see that flyer or whatever.
You mail them and say,
Yep.
please put this on your bulletin
Yep,
board.
we mail it to the psychology, social work professors, and they still, they might email it now, but they still send it out, and we still hear, oh, I saw the flyer. So, yeah, so we still, not nearly as much. When I started there, they were doing it like 3 times a year, so they really, where now we do it once just to get our name out. But yeah, but it was just a flyer on the board, and I had to call, get an application because they didn't have a website, the old,
because there was probably
right.
no such thing,
right? And because I was a male, I'm sure they just hired me right away, because they're always looking for male counselors. And
why is that?
I think, well, it's interesting. If you think of special needs kids, boys are identified. It's probably like, a 3-to-1 ratio, 4-to-1 ratio of boys to girls that are identified. And then in terms of, if you look at the profession of social work, special education is more of a female dominated role. So,
okay.
So, it's the inverse of, as I've even been hiring, we have tons of female staff that apply, and, we need to have 40 males for resident camp to live in the bunks with the boys. So males are always, they get a little easy ride at getting into camp for the most part.
Well, it's nice to be a white guy in America.
Yeah.
Well, so what do you remember what it was about this flyer that made you think, oh, yeah, I want to right away and apply to that?
Because I lived at home even when I went to university. I was like, it's in New York and I'll be away for the summer. And that was the first time I flew on an airplane.
Amazing. So had you led a fairly, local, fairly parochial existence?
Absolutely, yeah.
And prior to that, what was the furthest you'd been away from home?
I drove with my parents. Like we had family, like our vacations were visiting family. So we had family in Louisiana. So we would go visit that,
good.
So for a week you drive down,
Moline
yeah, exactly.
Springfield.
But that was mostly it, like going to visit them, and that was it. I've never, living in Southern Illinois, like I think my family never went to Chicago. Like I had never been to Chicago or anything. So the trip to New York was my first flight, 21 years old, and had not been anywhere besides, I think I drove to Washington, D.C. with some friends for a weekend or something, in college. And of course went to Florida for a week or something like that.
For spring break?
Yeah. So
nice. Where in Florida?
We went to Panama City.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So
that's pretty good.
But I had to work. So I worked all through college. Like I paid for school. And so, that was your responsibility. If you went to school, you funded schools. So,
right.
Yeah.
But were your folks supportive of that? The siblings?
They were supportive in terms of, I stayed at the house, they helped or whatever, but, financially that was all on you.
Right.
So.
But emotionally supportive were like, oh, that's great. You're getting a higher education.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. My dad was sort of like, oh, well, what do you, it's sometimes like I had an art methods class, for like how to teach art. And so I'm building art stuff for an elementary kid, and he comes home and is like, this is your homework, and is like, he couldn't wrap his head around the idea. He's like, you should join the union with me and you'll make way more of the and so
what kind of union was he
was
in?
a Boilermaker.
Okay.
And so he was a union guy to the end, and so he had, he was supportive, but like didn't quite understand. He's like, oh, you can make more money doing what I do, and why don't you want to do this, and you're paying to go to school, but
right,
but at the end he was very supportive, I think. Yeah.
So when you took the full-time job, actually when you went and finished the degree in elementary education at McKendree. Was he scratching his head like, why would you want to do that? And the follow-up question is, at some point in your career, did your dad say, okay, I get it, this is a good path for you?
I think he got it when I moved to Ramapo, and he came out and visited and, saw that I was like outdoors. I'm living at this beautiful 240-acre campus. There's a lake, and, so that's when it clicked for him and was like, oh, this makes sense. This makes sense for what you're doing. And I was always pretty much the one that was gonna go do what I wanted to do, like I was pretty independent. Like I worked all the time, so my parents were like, well, you're working, you're getting a grade, you don't have a curfew. Like I lived independently from high school on. There wasn't a lot of restrictions on me because
And what was your first ever job?
I worked, when I was probably 14 at a strawberry farm.
Did you have to get a work permit or something at that age?
No. It was $2.50, I think, and you had to go through the strawberry farm, and there's like runners for the strawberry plants, and so we had to make sure they replanted them so they stayed in the rows. So that's how they keep them. And so I'm sure they have, but they just hired us kids, and we did that.
Did you clip off the runners?
Yeah, you would try to replant them so they would stay in the row, and so we would do that, and so we would do that for an hour after school. So that was my first job, and get $2.50 or $5. We'd get a $5 check at the end of the day.
Really? They paid you every day?
Yeah, they would pay you every day.
Check.
Yeah, with a check for $5.
I love that. What other childhood jobs did you have? Or college jobs or high school jobs?
I worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Nice.
Yeah,
I was Caseyville
and Fairview, like the little, sort of like the Kingston here, where all the mall and all that stuff. So I worked there, and then, which was terrible. I mean, my dad loved it because you got to bring home the leftover chicken. So that was, my dad would have loved if I stayed there probably and didn't go on for a career. Right. He was happy with me bringing home the bucket of chicken, So I did that. That was like my first 16-year-old job.
When's the last time you ate KFC?
A long time.
Do you feed it to your family? Do they like it?
I think we've been once, but just because I'm like, oh, I used to work here, and but yeah, no, I was not a good cook, so I got eventually moved right up to cashier because I, let the grease trap, didn't seal it correctly, and the entire grease went over the entire floor.
Right.
And so we had to throw ice down, and then so it would absorb it and then scrape it up. Fortunately, my best friend's brother was the manager, so I didn't get fired. But that's why I got moved up to cashier after that.
This big time.
I was no longer a cook.
It's nice. And then where'd you go from there?
Oh, bunch of different odd jobs at the mall. At the mall, I worked at, I think, Wilson's leather jacket store. I did that for a few years, and then I worked at Sam's Club through college because it paid, I think we were paying back then. They were paying $7, $8, and it was pretty decent money. So I worked there for all through college, and then they let me go to Ramapo during the summers. I was able to take off the summer.
Oh, nice.
Sort of made it as an educational, like it was an internship or whatever. So they would let me go, and then I would just come back and work there.
And do you shop at Sam's Club now? Are you a member
I'm still a member of Sam's Club. Yep.
That's nice.
Yeah. So, and I have that was sort of my college year. So there's like a group of, I think, 8 of us that are still, we get together. Every time I go home, we all have dinner. We go out, and so
Sam's Club cohorts,
Sam's Club friends.
Are any of them still there?
Yes, actually, one of them is still he's gonna retire from there, but but we've been there. There's like about 6. I guess there's 8 of us, and we're all still in touch. Go to each other's events and stuff, and every year I come back, we all get together, go out for dinner. So.
And it sounds like there was never any thought in your mind of just staying put.
No, I mean, well, I think once I came to Ramapo, there wasn't before that experience, there was, I'm just going to settle in this area.
So when you go home and see your friends, do you think, oh, that could have been my life?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
absolutely. But I'm glad I'm not there, like that's,
Sounds like you landed in a great place
but
here.
yeah, absolutely.
And when you did land here, what were you doing for Ramapo?
So I started as a counselor, just
Uh-huh.
as a counselor like everyone else. So as a counselor for the summer, and then I became a assistant head and a head counselor. And then so when they started year-round programming, so we started a teen program where we'd pick kids up from the city and bring them up for a weekend. And so I had a group of boys, of about 20 boys that I would bring up, and then about 15 to 20 girls. And we'd do weekends with them, and then we'd run school groups from New York City. So I started in program for several years. I was leading different programs
And
there.
how were those kids brought into the program?
They were mostly kids that came during the summer.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
and
so-
then how did they find Ramapo, or how did Ramapo find them?
So Ramapo's been around for, I mean, was it 2 years ago we celebrate our 100th anniversary. But we get a lot of kids. Most of them are New York City based. There's several different social service agencies that refer kids. So we worked with a school called PS 169. That's in, for a lot of people maybe know, District 75, the special needs district for New York City. So they referred about 20 to 30 kids, and then we have a couple different agencies, and then there's self-pay families that come, and then some scholarship kids that just come on their own as well that we scholarship. So it's a at the height of when I was there, or before COVID, I would say we were running about 200 kids during resident camp
Right.
session.
And now I think I read on your website 18,000 kids a year in all of your programs.
Yeah, between all of them, and so we run during the school year, we have a retreats program. So we have a lot of school groups that come up for either the day or for an overnight experience, especially from the city. We'll have school groups come up. We'll do team building and things like that with them. And, it's a real neat experience for teachers, I think, to come up, see the kids outside of the classroom, relate to each other in a different way. I mean, it's something for a teacher to be on an overnight experience and for the kids to say, oh, the teacher brushes their teeth in the morning, like just that experience of that. This is a real person,
Right,
and so
right.
so the schools really talk about how it impacts not only just the kids, but the impact of the relationships with the teachers. And even if it's just
It's amazing.
one day, like it's for kids to see that your teacher's a real person, or your teacher, I mean, depending on the teacher, but some of them will do the ropes course, and all of a sudden that's really, for the kids to see a teacher climb up the ropes and maybe be nervous, or just to, to see them be a person, I think is so important for kids to,
Right.
and I think it can really help the teacher's relationship in terms of when they're working with them in the classroom. So
Right. And as you said, for the teachers to be able to see the kids in a completely different environment.
exactly, and especially for kids maybe that struggle academically, but maybe at this part, some of the different activities we do, they strive at it. So it's a really great experience for the teachers to see them in a different setting too.
Right. Let me ask you, it dawns on me, there's lots of places around here. There's Devereaux and Anderson for kids who are different needs
Yep.
than sort of mainstream. Why would that happen? Why would there be a cluster of those kinds of educational opportunities right here?
Yeah, it's interesting how Rhinebeck is attracted. There is Astor here for a long time.
Right.
And so I don't know if it's just sort of something of getting kids out of the city environment. I remember our former exec talking about, just Ramapo being a therapeutic milieu just by being away from the city and being in a different setting. And so maybe that's part of,
Right.
the...
But like over in the
that's-
Catskills, like Woodstock here, there aren't like 4 or 5 places in close proximity.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I mean, it's sort of something that's new to me to even because I don't ever remember back where I was, group homes, or that wasn't something that I even really knew about, until I came here.
Right.
So
you got your degree in education.
yeah.
You came here, you worked your way up. And where did you think you wanted to go? Did you think maybe you'd stay there that long and build a career at Ramapo?
I wasn't really, it just sort of happened, and so sort of building my life, get married, have kids, and all of a sudden I'm still there. And, the executive director at some point was like, look, you got to get out of program so that you can have a family life. You don't want to be working every weekend and those type of things. So that's when he sort of told me, he's like, look, we need someone to, we've grown so much. We need someone to just manage the operations of the place. And so sort of shifted there. And then, the camp world, it's actually a profession, like you don't think of it as a profession, but it's a real profession. And there's a lot of skill sets to run we pretty much run a mini town for 8 weeks. And so,
Right.
we're taking in 200 young college age kids who are enthusiastic and energetic, but come with all of their stuff that they come with. And then the population we're taking with just comes with a whole different, even a mainstream camp is, can be challenging for the summer, let alone the type of kids that we manage. So,
and I'm guessing the adult to student ratio at Ramapo is a little bit closer to 1-to-1 than other places, other camps.
Exactly. So there'll be typically in our resident camp, there'll be about 6 kids in a cabin. And there'll be anywhere from 5 to 6 staff with them as well. Not all the time. There's usually 3 or 4 staff that travel with that group, but then, there's a waterfront counselor, there's a ceramics counselor, and so they live in the bunks or are assigned to a group as well. So, in that free time, there can be almost a 1-to-1, or at least, not quite 1-to-1, just because, between days off and time off and stuff, but we need that level of supervision for the kids we've got.
Right. And you said 8 weeks. Is that sort of like June, July, August, 8 weeks?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, we do. The kids come the first session is 2 weeks, the second session is 3 weeks, the third session is 3 weeks, and then we have a 1 week small, we only take about 50 kids, and it's sort of like, we call it get your feet wet trial for resident camp for new kids that maybe haven't done camp. So we do that the last week of August.
And what's the main age group you serve?
I would say now it's about starting at 11 up to about 22, 23.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we have even some young adults because what happens is some of our kids are able to navigate on to other systems, but especially young adults on the autism spectrum, there's just not a lot of opportunities for them for the summer. And some of them just don't have the skill set that it's more of a respite program for them. And so there's just not that many programs that are out there for kids, especially 18 to 20, 21. A lot of special needs parents always talk about that drop off of when your kid hits 21,
right,
and all these services and everything.
I was going to ask, where do they go?
Right. So, so we have a transition to independence program. So we have about 15 to 18 kids, and the title of the program is Staff Assistant Program. And so what we've done is taking some of our kids, and they're young adults, and some of them have go to college. They're not kids. There might be kids on the spectrum, but they have language. But it's the goal of kids that could live independently, but they need some help. And you're not going to learn how to live independently by staying with your mom and dad. That's just not going to happen. And so they live on our campus. They might be here for 6 months. They might be here for a year. They learn job skills at Ramapo. They work in our dining hall. They work with our maintenance team. They might work at the after-school program in Rhinebeck. We get them different jobs in the community. Some of them work at Bard, at Brookmead. And so we build up their job skills. We build up their relationship skills. We teach them how to live. They start in a room, then they graduate to an apartment. And then the goal is hopefully for them to either to go into a school, an education program, or move on to the world of work. And so we have about 15 to 20 kids that are with us year round.
Okay. And is there an age cutoff or a certain
we try to keep a level because you want to keep a peer group. So it's probably between 18 and 23, 24, And
then is there an agency or, a place that you can sort of pass them off to so they're not without any oversight, any care?
I think there's some and again, this is not my expertise, but there is like OPWD, and there's different agencies where kids get like money where they can self-direct. They call self-direct funding that will help support them in terms of seeking some other opportunities. But I would say there's not a whole lot, and so then and that's sort of the goal for us, is to help them find somewhere. And some of the kids have actually moved to Rhinebeck, have eventually found an apartment in Rhinebeck and stayed in Rhinebeck because it's a very supportive community, and it's a nice pace for them. And so
and y'all are very supportive of Rhinebeck as well. You have childcare at CLS.
Yeah.
You have Northern Duchess daycare for preschool toddlers and pre-K kids. And Rhinebeck people love that. They love these services you provide.
And it's interesting. When I first started, the former executive director was very much not wanting to be out in the community. And so we just did resident camp. And because of who our kids are, and the idea of, he was very worried about people being concerned about the type of kids we were bringing up and bringing to camp. And so whether this community, at least when he was there in the 80s and 90s, was as welcoming for this. So we were pretty, quiet and not as involved. And then slowly over the years, as we built our resident camp program, as we built our retreat program, then we started opening and, looking at other different programs and became more of a community member. And I think that's sort of happened as, we developed more of a year-round staff. When I started there, I was employee number 5 for year-round employees. There was the executive director, the camp director, the accounting director, and the maintenance guy, and so now we have, 50 full-time employees. So we have people that are in the community. And so we have, so that also just sort of brings the community in.
Right.
And I would think even for me, it wasn't until I had kids that I really embraced the community, because working at Ramapo, I had this self-contained, there was 15 of us. We were all in our, 20s, 30s, and just hanging out, and we had that community. And so it wasn't like we needed to find a community in Rhinebeck. But once you have kids, and all of a sudden, and then you sort of really start to embrace the community. And so that's sort of how we ended up, I think, collecting some of these other programs.
Right. So I'm guessing you've been there longer than anybody else.
We actually I have a colleague who has been there.
3.
He's employee number 2, Mike, and he's been there since, I think, 70. He started when he was 16, and he's been there since the 70s. And then I have
amazing.
A colleague, Jen, who started seasonally in 92. That's still there, and then she came on year round after I did. But she came and even our accounting person has been there since 95. So it's like a place
that's pretty good.
Holds on to people for, you find it and you feel comfortable, you like it.
So your early 20s, you moved to Rhinebeck, New York, where you'd had a little bit of a summer experience before, probably mostly staying on camp, and now you're living here full time. What did you do for fun?
What did we do for fun?
And when was this? This was mid-90s?
Mid-90s. So, I mean, we went to the Rhinecliff Hotel.
Yeah.
So that was the big...
Everybody went there. It sounds like it was pretty rough.
Yeah. But that was it. I mean, we went there. I mean, summer camp sort of took over Rhinecliff Hotel, I think, during the summer, because we would have 200 college-age staff coming. So we hung out there, and then, that was... And then we just had our own group of friends. And so you would just hang out. And, I mean, Ramapo requires you to work. Like, during the summer, you're working 6 days a week. You're there 24/7, 6 days a week. You get a day off a week. Like,
right.
That's the job. And then, and then, like, when I was in program, we were working weekends. You ran programs during the weekend. If you have a school group, like, it's a lifestyle living there,
Right.
So that was just it. So you just grew up with those people.
And in what year did you move from programs to other stuff, director of operations?
It was about 2004, 2005, somewhere around there.
And at that point, it became much more like a 9 to 5 or 9 to 7 or 8 kind of gig?
No, because during the summer you are on. Like,
Right.
that's just it. It's 6 days a week. And then if everything's going well, if something comes up on the day you're not there, you come back, like that's just
Right.
the reality of the work. It definitely goes down a little bit in the year, but as the director of operations, smoke detector goes off, the fire department gets called, there's water, it's constant. So there's always something going on,
So it's not just operations of the camp; it's the physical plant as well.
Yes,
it's
yeah.
everything, every operation.
Every operation is even the daycare, something going on at the daycare, or so I have a little bit of everything.
Right. But you have lodging still right there.
Yeah. So my house, I live right on the campus, which in some ways is wonderful. I live at the top of the road now. I used to live, when I first started, I lived right in the campus. And so then anyone would knock on your door. Now they have to, at least go at least 3/4 of a mile up the road, But of course, I see everyone that comes in and out of the campus because we live right there. So,
Huh.
yeah.
So you think you'll stay there until you retire?
Not sure. I mean, I think one of the things is that, once at least I love living in Rhinebeck. And so, and I've always, the people I'm working with, some of my friends that were counselors with me in 95 left, they went on and had other careers, but have recently come back. So the new camp director, Lenora Seeley, is her and her wife, Lisa, have been friends of mine. They were like, you meet these people at camp. And so they were like my best friends. And so we've stayed in touch for 20 some odd years. And then the camp director role came up. I called her and now she's back working. So it's like,
oh, that's
we're
great.
back from when we were in 1995, when we were 22. And now we're all in charge and we're all hanging out together, so it's just, so it just sort of worked out. So it's been full circle with that. And so I don't know.
Do you get headhunted by other camps? You must.
A little bit. Yep. But I'm not interested in working in there's definitely there are camp directors, especially at a mainstream camp, a for-profit camp, that are making tons of money because it's just, and so, but I can't see giving my time and effort to something like that. That's just not. And so, Ramapo's a mission I believe in. And so I found a place that I like. And so I'm just not looking to go anywhere else.
And your kids, I'm guessing they were born here at Northern Dutchess.
Yep.
And they came home to a house on Ramapo.
Yep. That's all they've ever known.
Grown up there. Yeah.
So yeah, and it's been great. I mean, I love the Rhinebeck community, but I also love the fact that they are at Ramapo and they see the world for more than just what this community is. Not that I don't love this community, but I don't know if this community is quite the world, the rest of the world. And so I want them to understand what else is going on. And so I think of one of the most poignant stories for me is when my daughter was 6, and it was before we had the day camp. She would travel with the girls' bunk, and it was the special needs girls' bunk, and so she was traveling with them. And Church of Messiah, I don't know if they make quilts for our kids. At the end of each session, they give out quilts.
Uh-huh. And
so one of the kids are all sitting there in the circle, and I'm watching them. And, and Bella's 6 years old. And this girl, this autistic girl, was just anxious or whatever, but walked up and grabbed her hair and is yanking on it. And so, all the counselors are running over there to get her hair. And Bella's just sitting there, just sitting calmly. And and I'm saying, because I'm trying not to be that parent, so I'm just sort of watching. And then she looks at me. So after they get her hair out of the girl's hands, Bella's still calm, but she walks over and then she starts crying. But she's like, I'm not mad at her. I know she just was upset about something and didn't know what to say. Oh. And so at 6 years old, she was able to, by being at camp and being around somebody, understand where people, and so that was just such a moment for me to be that kids don't get that opportunity. And so I've seen that as a person, as she's grown up to be 14, and even though she's 14 and has those 14, she's a very caring and compassionate kid and has lots of empathy for everyone. And so that has, that's been the blessing of being there and having my kids grow up there.
Right. What an amazing thing. As you say, not a lot of kids get that opportunity to sort of grow up with that amount of compassion or being manifested around them all the time.
Yeah.
That example.
When they were kids, you would just walk around and like you'd hand them off to other staff and people would just take it was just like they were raised as like, everybody's kids. And so it was a really beautiful experience for them.
And so are your kids at Rhinebeck High School and junior high?
So Lincoln's at middle school and Bella's at a freshman at the high school.
Wow. And are they happy there?
Yeah, they're very happy there.
And is their mom from around here?
She's from Ohio.
Oh.
Yep.
Whereabouts?
Akron.
Oh.
Yep. And we met at Kemp. So, it's the whole Kemp story.
My goodness. And was she working there at some point?
Yep.
For long?
She worked there for, she started in, I think, 2000. She did a couple summers and then came year round. Did year round for a little bit, worked in our health center as an EMT. I was an EMT years ago. That was one of the things the director wanted us to be EMTs, just to sort of understand some of the basic, accidents, emergencies that go on. So, and so she worked in the health center. And I think so then she went on to get her nursing degree and her nurse practitioner degree.
Oh, wow.
So
just amazing. So you guys were like camp royalty.
We were the camp family. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, that's what happens.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so sweet. It must feel good for the kids.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, it's interesting. It's like, I think the other thing is time doesn't go by fast there because every year I have 200 young staff coming in. And so sometimes I have to remind myself that I'm not this, I'm like, oh, I was 22 when I did this. So I'm sure they look at me with the gray hair and who's this old man here, but I see myself as I was there with them. And so it's just the same thing every summer. We're doing the same thing. So
right.
I haven't grown up, but now this will be my 30th summer.
That's just nuts. Again, hats off to you and cheers. And thanks for bringing this delicious wine. 30 summers. So you mentioned that you had EMT training.
Yeah, I went did it, and just to have it for camp. So I went through Ed Murray that runs Northern Duchess Paramedics was the operation. He was actually in my role before he left. Yeah, so.
But that's fairly rigorous training.
So yeah, the EMT. Yeah, so I did that. I did the EMT training. So there was about 4 or 5 of us that took the course.
And have you kept that up?
I did not keep it up.
Okay.
So, but it was enough to, and now being at camp and I supervise the health center, it's like you sort of I get a pretty good healthcare knowledge just from being there.
Right.
And seeing all the different stuff that comes through.
I'll bet. And I saw on your LinkedIn that you've got these other credentials, a Camp Food Service Conference credential, creating a culture of abuse prevention at camp credential, a day camp innovation at its best credential, and a state of the camp insurance market credential, which open a whole can of worms of consideration, the insurance issues.
Oh, and risk. I mean, risk is, it's a huge concern of ours. I mean, we run a high risk population. So we have a lake, we have, we put kids on ropes courses. We have young, wonderful staff, but are inexperienced, they're during college. And especially nowadays, my experience is a lot of kids aren't working. They're not working through high school or, a lot of times this is their experience at Ramapo is their first job. And so,
counselors, young counselors in training or counselors.
You're having 19-year-olds have to make some decisions, and so during training, I'm always focused on, the end of the day, all the program people talk about all the skills and we want kids to make friends and have skills. I said, at the end of the day, I want you to get them back to their parents the same way they dropped them off.
All of
that
them.
Is my goal.
The campers, the counselors.
Yes, just let's get you back. And then I will feel we have had a success, because, we have nonverbal kids that will walk away and not walk away because they're trying to do anything wrong. They're just wanderers. And so, we have to, how do you find a kid on a 240-acre campus that has no language?
Right.
And so, I have to get to these young people that you have someone else's child.
You need to keep your eyes on them.
You have to keep your eyes on them all of the time.
Oh my goodness.
And so there's just those, and that's sort of like one of my roles. Like when that happens, like I'm the one drilling people and, telling everybody where to go. And so it's,
Yeah. But do you have like a 4-wheeler or a little golf cart or something?
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah. So
your insurance rates must be just through the roof. And as director of operations, that fall under your...
It falls under, mine is the risk mitigation, like those type of things. So our CFO has to worry about the finance. But camping in general is becoming it's becoming a part of where a lot of nonprofits are not able to operate anymore. And insurance is one of the reasons, especially, the Boy Scouts, the Catholic Church have had the abuse. Abuse is such a problem, or, it was such a problem in some of these agencies. And so, and one of the things we always tell parents, because that's definitely, if you're a parent, well, what do you do to mitigate that? One of the things for us is there are 6 people working with this group of kids.
Right.
And so
counselors aren't alone.
Right. They're not alone. You're never alone with the kid. And the idea that, someone could do something like that to one of our kids and find the privacy or the space to even attempt to do that is probably not realistic. Not that we don't do all the other things to mitigate and training and things like that. We have a big culture of no secrets at camp. You're not allowed to have any secrets. I tell the staff, if I find out you have a secret with someone, you're fired. There's just no reason. There is nothing you should have with a child or a client here that
secret between employee and camper.
Camp kid.
Right.
Or really, we even say secrets between staff. Like you're not being inclusive. If you're having secrets, that's not being an inclusive community, and that's what we're about here. And so there shouldn't be anything like, not that there aren't things that you have to use discretion about, but there shouldn't be anything that's a secret.
So it's 100%. The no secret is okay.
No
like,
secret.
Don't tell the other friend that I hate the color blue.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
You have to be that explicit with staff, especially 18. Like, you just have to be that black and white with them, I think, to really be, and to tell them that that's our culture, and that our culture is, if you're someone that is going to hurt a child and there are no secrets, because that's the culture here, you're going to leave.
Right.
And that's the idea, to make our place so that, because people that want to hurt children, they are looking for places that are a place for them where they could do it. And they will know pretty quickly at our place they can't do that there. We've created a culture that...
I love that. That makes so much sense. I really like that a lot. So where do you recruit your seasonal employees from?
So before COVID, we were mostly college students throughout the U.S., majority, Northeast, but all over. Since COVID, we have probably, I would say, about 40% of our staff are international. So we have staff from Europe, we have staff from Mexico, we have staff from Israel. So we have staff from all over, which again is another great piece of being at Ramapo and being around all these people from all over the world.
Right. And do you still have posters put up at McKendree University?
I think so. I think they're still on the list.
And have you gotten people from there, from Caseyville?
I think there's another university, SIU, Southern Illinois University, and it's a bigger state school, and so we've had a few young adults. Carbondale, yeah, that's the parties, or was the party school years ago.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So we've had a few people come through there that, but no one from actually Caseyville, but for a few towns around, we've had a few come through.
Right. That must be kind of fun.
Yes,
for
absolutely.
Those
to
kids
relive,
to come and
and be like, I can talk to them about all the different places and stuff. Yeah.
And what are the places that you bring up? What are the places that everybody from around there knows
Well, I mean, first of all, you're a St. Louis Cardinals fan.
Okay.
Baseball is,
Right.
that's so everybody connects with that. And then there's, Emo's Pizza. There's the ice cream place. There's an ice cream place, at least on the Illinois side.
What's it called?
It's Dairy Haven, and it's actually in my town. And that's the one, like, it always has a line. And, so there's those type of places, and then that you connect to. And then, all the sort of big stuff in St. Louis that people go visit or whatever.
Dairy Haven.
Yes, the ice cream place.
And you go there when you go back?
Absolutely, almost,
And what do you get?
I get orange sherbet twist. Their orange sherbet is the best. It's different than anything I've ever had. Supposedly, it's their own recipe, and my mom lives a block away, so when I go stay with her, I'm there probably every day. Go through the ice cream.
I love that.
Yeah.
What a blast. So let me just talk, we only have a couple of minutes left, about some of the other programs that Ramapo has, because I was surprised at all the things. There's Ramapo training, staff assisting experience you mentioned, Ramapo retreats, the day camp, which is separate from Camp Ramapo.
Correct.
And the Northern Duchess daycare. Tell me about the Ramapo training. You hit on that a little bit. But I love the idea that you're training kids to take your knowledge out into the world.
Right. And sort of where it came up with the idea was, the board could not replicate camp. Like you couldn't, we'd love to replicate camp, but the costs of having a 240-acre campus and buildings and all of that stuff, the infrastructure was just not feasible. So they took a look at our counselor training and what we do and how we work with kids and said, this is something that we can do. And so let's get into schools, let's get into after school programs, community-based organizations. So we work with, we have probably I think they've got about 8 or 9 right now, staff that work in the New York City or with different school systems and go in and coach teachers, coach youth workers in terms of how to work with kids, talk about school climate, things like that, sort of bring a little bit of the culture of camp to the school environment.
And are you all sort of like ever expanding the programs that you offer out in the world?
We're sort of at that crossroads. I think COVID really took our agency because we didn't run resident camp that summer. We didn't run all of our training. We had to, you were no longer going in. So we're sort of rebuilding and sort of rethinking a little bit because we've collected a lot of different programs and we're sort of trying to make sure we're sort of mission driven.
Right.
And so we're sort of at a crossroads, I think, and we're going to, over the next few years, take a look at, where we're headed and make sure we're not just collecting programs and becoming, the YMCA, like that's what they do. Is that who we are? We're not so we're sort of, as a leadership staff, we have a new director, executive director, Dr. Daniel Stevens. And so, he's taking it diligently and we're sort of taking a look at everything and seeing if we're following our mission. And
right.
So that's our next few years to see. So,
love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. We're out of time. It's really zoomed by. I want to mention one thing, Ramapo's Family Climbing Club, which is open to the public.
Yeah.
It looks like, and that's tomorrow.
That's tomorrow.
And you can go to the website. What's the URL?
Ramapoforchildren.org.
And sign up for that. It's cheap or free.
Yeah.
It seems like sort of either. Ramapo's Family Climbing Club. It sounds like kind of a blast.
It's a great way to spend the afternoon.
And Scott Kemp, thank you so much for being here and answering all these questions. It's just fascinating about this organization right in our backyard and about your lifetime working there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. Have a great Friday and fabulous weekend.